Hello and welcome to Will Watches. This is my review for June. So the first half of this will be spoiler free, and then halfway through the video we'll get into spoilers. There'll be a warning, so you know. So I think off the bat, I really enjoyed this movie, even though it is very flawed. So this definitely suffers from the kind of part one thing that is kind of cursing Hollywood. I think, there's a lot of stories that are great stories, but splicing them up into these different parts just really doesn't do them justice. And it's always kind of the part one that suffers the most from this, because it kind of tampers with the kind of act structure that a movie should go through. Like this movie, for example, is very front loaded with kind of the action and the warlike stuff. And then towards the end, it's a lot more character focused, when really that should be flipped. So we have the character focus at the beginning so we can get invested with the characters, and then the more actiony stuff towards the end. But this is kind of the first half. We obviously get a lot of intro to the characters, but there is a lot of action and things being set up there, and it feels like we're not invested with the characters quite enough yet. And then towards the end, the kind of final conflict that kind of finishes off the movie, it feels very low stakes in comparison, which I understand, not all the stakes have to be explosion heavy fights and things like that, but the final one, it feels like what it's going for is a bit more of like a character moment, but it doesn't quite hit with me. And I think that's because a lot of the time in this movie, it feels like you just aren't quite attached enough with the character. And then, of course, the movie kind of ends when you're getting like the most invested into it. It's like, oh, it's getting good, and then it's finished, and you have to wait for a part two, and we don't even know if there is going to be a part two for this, which makes it even worse, I think. Because if we knew there was a part two coming, like definitely it was like the studio had confirmed it, then it would be a bit less of like a gut punch. I think with part one movies, as the movie was coming to a close, it felt like I can sense it's a long movie, the movie's kind of coming to a close. I'm like, where are they gonna end this off? There's not like a final act, so the movie's wrapping up now. You're like on the edge of your seat wondering like, oh, is it gonna end here? Is it gonna end here? Is it gonna end here? I do wonder if this story would be better told as like a series, as a TV show. You could maybe make it like hour-long episodes. This was almost 3 hours, so this ends halfway through the show, and then there's another 3 hours, so it's like a 6-part mini-series. I think that could work better than what we're getting with these part one stories, because it just seems like they're kind of plaguing Hollywood. There's these long, big stories that Hollywood wants to tell, but because they're cutting them up, it just does a disservice to these stories. I did find it funny that, for all of the marketing, there's nowhere in the marketing does it say like part one or anything, but in the movie when the June title card like comes up, it has part one under. And there was the guy sitting next to me in the cinema who was like, part one, what? It kind of seems like they're keeping it a secret that this is the part one to the story. So yeah, I just didn't feel very invested in the characters or the conflict. Some of the villains, they have really cool designs. Like the Baron, he was really cool, the way he looked and the way he moved, but I just didn't feel like intimidated by them, I guess, even though they are shown to be strong and powerful. But I don't know, it just feels like there's something a little bit off with all of the characters. There's just something missing, and I'm not quite sure what that is. So I had the opportunity to see an advanced screening of this in IMAX, and I think that's definitely the way to watch it. The visuals and the music here are kind of what carry the movie, because there's so much happening where I'm just looking at the screen like, wow, this is gorgeous, Denis Villeneuve's fingerprints are like all over this. You know, you can see kind of some Arrival influence with the way some ships are moving, where they just kind of eerily rise up, and then the sound design around that as well, it reminds me very much of Arrival. And then I can see some kind of Blade Runner influence as well, because on the planet Arrakis it's a bit more run down and grungy, and that reminds me a lot more of kind of the Blade Runner aesthetics. There's a lot of things that kind of remind me of his past work. This definitely feels like this was a good project for him, because it's kind of like this amalgamation of visuals and things from Arrival and from Blade Runner, and then mixing that all up and introducing some new elements as well. I really enjoyed some of the kind of culture and religious aspects of it. You know, there seems to be quite clear influence from like Middle Eastern and Muslim countries in some of the aesthetics, and of course because it is set on a desert, you can see why that would be kind of like an influence on this film. The Baron is really cool design wise. Skarsgård is basically unrecognizable as him, and he's just like really grimy and slimy and disgusting. He makes for a great villain, but there is just still some little bit of intimidation that I'm not quite getting from him. Yeah, so I think all of the kind of technical side of this film is done really well, but it's the kind of story that lets it down a bit, just because of how it cuts short, you know? So, you know, all of the ship designs are super cool. All of the cinematography is gorgeous. All of the music and sound design is great. All of the VFX are basically flawless. But all of those things are just kind of topping for the actual story. You know, you could have a film that was awful in all of those things, but if it had the best story ever, it would still be a great film, because that's the meat and potatoes of a movie, you know? It's kind of style over substance at the moment, but you can see the things that they are setting up, so it kind of makes it frustrating seeing all of these things being set up and not seeing them concluded. So I really hope we get a part 2 and it can wrap this story up in a really great way. So in terms of the performances and the characters, I feel like a lot of the characters are actually quite simple, so they fall into kind of a lot of these stereotypes. Like Oscar Isaac, his performance is good, but his character doesn't really give him much to go with. It's kind of like the stoic father figure who's a king, is trying to teach his son. It's things we have seen before, you know? So he gives, you know, a good performance, but there's nothing that was like blowing my mind with it. And it's kind of the same with Timothée Chalamet. It is just kind of the chosen one. He has to step up and earn his place. It's things we have seen before, and you know, he gives like a serviceable role, but Paul as a character does just kind of seem kind of flat. I know it sounds like I'm saying a lot of negatives here, but I think it's just because all of the positives are to do with the more technical side, so all I can really say about them is, oh, they're really good. But the more like character side and the plot side, where there's like more things to discuss there. So I know it sounds like I'm talking about negatives a lot, but I did still enjoy the film. I just don't know if Timothée Chalamet is right to be this like big Hollywood star. I think I enjoy him more in smaller indie roles than I do in a setting like this. He does do like a good job though. I do, at some points I am like, you're not watching it and thinking, oh, I'm looking at Timothée Chalamet, you know how it is with some actors like The Rock. Like The Rock always plays The Rock, but here you do, you know, he does feel like it's a unique character. I'm watching Paul, I'm not watching Timothée Chalamet. I mean, he gives a good performance with what he was given, but there wasn't much for him to do here that was like super unique. I think Jason Momoa was kind of a standout here because he comes in with so much kind of energy and life. It's kind of like a bit of a breath of fresh air for it. Yeah, just seeing the kind of betrayals by different factions and the different warring groups, that was what was most interesting here for me. Seeing kind of some sabotage and some backstabbing and a lot of this kind of like political stuff. This movie, it reminds me a lot of kind of ancient stories of like kings and queens. That's kind of what this is. It's like a story about royalty. It's just set in space, you know? I really liked some of the mixing of kind of analog and digital here, because we have, it's very futuristic, set in space and stuff, but then there's like a scroll written on paper and wax ceiling and things like that. And so it's like this is set 8,000 years in the future, but there's still these things from our human society today that have been passed on through this, you know? Because I assume all of the characters here are human. It's like humans have gone out and colonized all of these planets, because even on Arrakis there's the natives, but they are human, right? It's just they were like some people that went to that planet and they adapted to survive there. It's so far in the future that, you know, you consider them to be natives if they've been on the planet for like 8,000 years and developed their own culture and technology and stuff. Okay, I think now I'll get into spoilers. Yeah, I really like the setup here with kind of the Harkonnen wanting revenge on the Atreides and how that, you know, comes about. There's a lot of cool things like the guy being concreted into the wall before they left so he could try and assassinate them. That was super cool. And just the design of the Baron, he just had a great design, but I just wish we got a bit more of him, because it just felt like there was something missing. He needed to be just a tiny bit more intimidating. And at one point I thought, okay, you know, there's the plot point with the tooth and breathing out the poison. I thought, oh, they've already taken care of him. So I am very glad that he survived that, actually. It makes it a bit more interesting for the story. And of course, we do see how evil he is at points where he kills the doctor. He was like, you can be with your wife now, and then kills him. So we do see like he has all of these kind of sinister and evil moments. But I still feel like there was just something off. There was just something where I wasn't like intimidated by him. And I'm not quite sure what that was. Maybe we needed to see him do even more villainous things, or see him be like even more intimidating, because he is this type of villain that's very calm and thinking and relaxed almost, and that can be really intimidating with like just how calm they are. So I can see what they were going for. I just think it's just something off. I think some of the stuff with the visions kind of hold back the movie. I don't know, there's like, I'm not quite sure how the visions work, because right at the end of the film he kills that guy in battle, but I'm pretty sure we saw him seeing visions of him having a talk with that guy. Maybe I was just like, I got the two characters mixed up, or can he actually change the future? So he has these visions of the future, these dreams, but that means he can influence things. I don't know kind of what's going on with that kind of thing. Is it, you know, is everything set in stone? How the timeline works, I guess. Is everything set in stone that he sees? Or is it he can change the future, you know? I love the way the spice looked, where it had this kind of glimmer or like glitter. It just looked really cool. It added this sense of like mystery to the spice. I really liked Paul's powers. So of course he has these kind of visions of the future, but also he has this royal voice, I guess, that can command people to do things, and he's still learning how to do it, but the effect of it was really cool, where it kind of echoes and it almost sounds like there's like a few different voices all saying the same thing at once. I want to see kind of how that power develops, what kind of uses it can have, because we've seen him do basic things like command people to untie him and things, but I wonder how powerful that actually is. Can he get people to confess to things and give him knowledge, and how many people can he affect? Like, if you got powerful enough, can you stand in front of an army and make them command you, you know? I think the most interesting thing here is the Fremen and this kind of religion they have about it, prophesizing like a chosen one. I'm guessing it was because it seems like they're all female, and then there's going to be a boy that's born, and he is like the chosen one. So the mother chooses to have a boy because she thinks she wants to give birth to this chosen one, and whoever this chosen one is, they can, you know, he is seeing visions of the future, and they're saying you can see all of time and space when it's like developed enough, if it is actually Paul who is the chosen one. Because you can see some kind of conflict with the characters. Some recognize him as the chosen one and some others don't. I found that quite interesting as well. I did find it funny how little Zendaya is actually in this, considering how much she is in the marketing for this movie. Like, really, she is only in the last 15 minutes of the movie, like where her character is physically there, and then she's kind of like sprinkled in through the visions. But it is funny how little she is actually in the movie. Also, there's no way the sandworms are only 400 meters long. When that first sandworm appeared, that looked like its mouth was like 400 meters in diameter. I don't believe for a second that they're 400 meters long. I really love the VFX with the shield effects. There's this moment where the bomb is being dropped and it hits the shield that's surrounding this building, and you just see the bomb like slow down. That moment was so cool. And then there's a moment where there's a sandworm, it's going through the dunes, you know, and it makes the sand almost look like an ocean the way it's moving. I do really like the kind of political setup with this, how there's like this galactic empire and there's an emperor and all of the kind of different factions here. I find that stuff really interesting in this, and I hope we see more of that. I imagine in a part 2 it's going to end with like a big war battle kind of thing. That side, and there's also this kind of religious sect that's kind of controlling things from the shadows a bit, it seems. That was really interesting as well. I think the mother is probably the most interesting character in the movie, just because of the kind of mystery around that. And we have this story of kind of the chosen one, but there is a part of me that feels like it could be the case where Paul isn't the chosen one, and that we see that he has a vision of his mother being pregnant, and perhaps that's like a younger brother that will be the chosen one. I'm not sure. I think that would be a good twist on the kind of chosen one, this is your destiny kind of story that is kind of going on here. But I did really find myself like immersed in this world. All of the world building was really good. Okay, so yeah, I think I've touched upon everything I wanted to talk about. Overall, I did enjoy the movie, but I just wish we had more of it so it could be a complete story, because that's where it almost falls flat. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, be sure to leave a like or a comment, and if you really loved it, be sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date for all the future uploads. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.